She felt her life was finally about to change. She had with the defendant last in 2012. So this was 8 years later since she had last lived with him on a regular basis. They had 3 children together. She will tell you that he basically came and went as he pleased. He had a different household. He did not pay.
What are you doing?
Any kind of regular basis. Sometimes he showed up on weekends, and yet he expected and anticipated that they were in a relationship, and that simply was going to be enough. In December of 2018, she didn't want to live that way anymore. And so for a variety of reasons, they broke up. And so that relationship, that separate houses, you come when you want. When you mess up, you just beg me for forgiveness or do a gesture that tries to get the same situation where you're always in control, was going to be over. And so for a few weeks, they didn't have any contact. And then slowly but surely, the defendant wanted to have visits with his kids, which of course was fine with her. And he was able to get back in touch with her on a regular basis, trying to get back together with her, again, trying the cycle of trying to get forgiveness and everything will change. But this time she wasn't going there. It doesn't mean she wasn't nice to him. Doesn't mean there weren't times where she tried out of kindness to explain why this relationship was not happening. Doesn't mean she didn't have feelings for him in some way, shape, or form based on their history. But she was ready to move on. And by February 17th of 2020, she was on a dating site and she met somebody where she thought maybe this will go somewhere. The person she was in contact with was Rosario Gutierrez. Now, he was from Kenosha, so there was that was a drive to sort of see what she was going to be able to make of this. But he seemed to love his kids and to have a relationship with his kids, and she liked that it might go somewhere. Now, this is the early weeks of this maybe relationship, right? It's not exclusive. And so she doesn't feel like she wants to share that yet with her 11-year-old who turns 12. And she certainly doesn't want to share it with the defendant, who is her ex. She knows him, and right in the sense that what I'm going to talk about next in the evidence, I'm going to ask you to look for a certain pattern. I'm going to ask you to consider whether the defendant, as I outline the next grouping of incidents, is an individual who shows by each of these incidents that he is overwhelmed with jealousy. You'll hear a number of communications where that is clear even from his own mouth, and that he has an overwhelming need in that jealousy to be in absolute control when it comes to Satan. Each of these incidences can be characterized as a gesture where he demands control, and as he loses control, we'll talk about what the evidence shows comes next. More and more irrational each time, more and more disturbing. And then I'm going to ask you to take a look at whether the defendant in each of these incidences shows you his determination to have absolute control by using every tool available. Using human spies, a person named Steve Lentz, he texts as a lookout for him. Age 11 and 12 will tell you I was recruited by him as essentially a spy. And that he's willing to use electronics too. Basically, every way you can spy on another individual, the defendant was employing in regards to Sadie Beecham. So let's talk about each of those incidences briefly. April 24th, and this is just a 1-month period where the defendant slowly but surely learns no matter not get control.
I am going to try and quickly find another feed because that is shit. It's going to annoy the crap out of me. It's going to keep stopping and starting like that. Opening statements. Fox 6. That might be a better one, I believe. Get past the judge again.
Sprayed blood. Law enforcement gets there. If she has a car in her driveway, and where I know said inside Rosalio's apartment. Day. On May 13th, Sadie goes down to Rosalio's. She is going down for food and to watch some movies. On the phone of the defendant, when taken into custody, on that phone, we have in the phone recordings of directions that look like GPS type directions, which direct you. They are deleted, but they are recovered. We don't have every one of them, but the pattern of them gets you to Rosalio's address. This is the defendant's phone that is traveling per those directions that were deleted to Rosalio's home on the same date Sadie has gone down there. Now, Sadie is in Rosalio's home. And I want you to picture this, that this is what the evidence will be. Sadie is having one of those conversations you have as you start your meal and you're sitting down to watch something on TV. Rosalio says something specific to her about, do you want to watch this or something else? Conversations that many of you have had hundreds of times in your life as you begin to start your meal. Suddenly, right after it comes from the lips of Rosario Gutierrez, she receives a text on her phone. The text is from the defendant. And the text is an exact quote of what Rosalio just said to her. It's an exact quote that he's just texted her. Now, he tells her later, oh, that's an accident. I didn't mean to text you. That was just an accident. But his phone at that moment in time is going off a Kenosha tower, not a tower by his home in Mequon, a Kenosha tower, and it's the tower closest to where Rosario Gutierrez lives. So not only do the directions get him there, and by the way, have him arriving at the right time, but his phone places him at that location, quoting what is being said inside Rosalio's apartment. I must be in control. Every gesture has the same pattern. I must be in control. By the next day, May 14th, we are now literally 3 days from Rosario Gutierrez being dead to everyone who knows him. May 14th, the defendant now is looking for a confrontation based on his text messages to Sadie. May 14th, 4:13 p.m. You want me to stop by to meet Junior tonight? 4:41 p.m., half hour later. Still not off this topic. So you're saying I can stop by and meet someone later. Now, none of Sadie's communications are inviting him over. Let's make peace. Let's talk. Why don't you come on over? Why don't you two meet? This is the defendant attempting to provoke, but revealing his intentions. This is a communication suggesting I am looking for a confrontation. Here's what Olivia says about the period we've talked about so far. She says, every time I and the twins come over, this is the daughter, I apologize. This is the daughter, age 12. Every time we come over, he leaves and goes to follow mom. Every time we kids come over. She says to law enforcement, I am his spy about mom. I did it to please him. Here's a plan that she describes, age 12, to law enforcement that the defendant has cooked up and convinced her to be ready to implement. A spy operation. You ready? The 12-year-old says, on an occasion where I and the kids are brought to my dad's house because it's a visit, and where I know that my mom is going over to Rosalio's home, the plan is I will call my dad and that my dad will drive us kids back to mom's house, which of course would be unoccupied, right? Because Sadie would have gone to Rosalio's home. So my dad will drive us back to the unoccupied house. It's important I keep a key so that I can get in even though mom's not there. I and the twins will go into the house, and then I will call my dad and tell my dad, even though he's just dropped me off, hey, mom abandoned us and left us alone. This is the 12-year-old telling law enforcement that this is the plan that the defendant devised for her, his spy. And she said, at that point, my dad would report this. He would report that my mom had left us abandoned. That is the lengths that we're willing to go to get control, to end this relationship. They call it the plan. It's discussed multiple times. Now, on May 16th, 2020, one day before Rosario Gutierrez is never again seen by those who love him, May 16th. Remember, I told you on May 17th how full of hope Sadie was. Well, here's why. On the 16th of May, Sadie gets a communication from Rosario saying to her, "Would you like to come meet my kids?" Rosario has a boy, 11, and a girl, 8. They're at his house for the weekend on the 15th and 16th, and she's being invited for the first time to meet his kids. And they go for ice cream. And I think Sadie will tell you that this is a truly meaningful moment in her life, still today when she thinks about it. Those few hours she spent with those kids and Rosario. She left for the night. She didn't spend the night. It was the last time she ever saw Rosario Gutierrez. But it meant something to her because it's not an exclusive relationship, but it felt like her hopes that this relationship was going to build and get bigger and get better and maybe be the relationship for her. It felt like this really mattered. Here's how the defendant was handling that same bit. Her to lay down with some Down syndrome Mexican version of your father. That's a text from the defendant to Sadie trying to impose himself in this real moment.
Did you have a phone yesterday?
He's texting spy Stephen Lentz, who lives just close enough to Sadie that he can see if cars are in her driveway. So he's a good lookout, right? He's a good lookout post. This is the defendant to Stephen Lentz on May 16th, asking if she has a car in her driveway. Remember, she doesn't have the kids. So whether a car's in her driveway or not is frankly none of his business.
Excellent.
But his spy is being employed.
I hope you had to unbutton your jeans and lay on the couch.
So on the 17th of May, that's the day after this big moment where Sadie met his kids. And Sadie has said throughout this case that it feels like the defendant is some way monitoring all her communications. Everything that she's communicating with Rosario feels like the defendant seems to somehow know it in real time. And no one knows how that happened. That's how it is. So at 1:52 p.m., this is literally 8 hours before Rosario Gutierrez is gone and dead to everyone.
Have a good day.
1:52 p.m., Sadie texts Rosario. Sadie says to him in the text, "I want to be yours and get more serious with our relationship."
And no doubt he will point them out.
See, that's how she felt after she met his kids. That's her putting herself out there.
There's one.
Right? Not an exclusive relationship, but here it is. So there's some text back and forth. The defendant, Rosario calls her at 8:30 p.m. that night. This is an hour and a half before he's never seen again. And she misses that call. His last text to her is at 8:36 p.m., his phone to her phone. She never hears from him again. She tries him on the 18th of May. This is a relationship where they are in communication in some way, shape, or form several times a day during this period of time. On the 18th, absolutely no communication from him. On the 19th in the morning, still absolutely no communication from him. And so finally, she jumps in her car and she drives from the Milwaukee area on that morning. What is going on? Trying to figure out what's happening. And she gets to his home in Kenosha. And she finds that the sliding door is open. You'll see in the pictures, Rosario Gutierrez has that apartment in an apartment complex that's the bottom floor, and his slider and his screen face right onto the road. So the sliding door is open, the screen is closed, and she looks in, and boy, does she see a lot of blood. She calls 911. And at the moment she calls 911 and law enforcement gets there, there will be a number of things that law enforcement focus on in their investigation. And I'd ask you to think about these areas of focus as you think about the evidence as it comes in this case. One area of focus is, when was Rosario Gutierrez last alive to those people who know him? The second area of investigation is, who has the motive and who has any pattern of conduct where they would be a person we should look to as a person who might have finished that pattern, completed that pattern, or acted on their motive and ended Rosario Gutierrez's life. And then the third, of course, area of investigation was, where is the body of Rosario Gutierrez? And I'm not going to belabor that in this opening.
I think she was talking to me, Anna. She was telling me who the victims are, not not you. I'm not sure if she is in Hef. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I don't even know if my my Discord link's working, but I will give it a go and put it in chat. I actually had some Tanya's son was going to help me set it all up properly. Where am I? And I don't think he's had a chance to do it as yet. But I will put the link in chat for you, and you're welcome to join. Where is it? Hang on. Get the proper link with the URL on it. There it is. Ooh. Copy. Come on. Copy. That's it. And paste. Hopefully that works. Let me know if it does or doesn't. All right, let's get back.
You'll hear about very substantial efforts in many jurisdictions involving many agencies to look for the body of Rosario Gutierrez, which is never found.
It takes me down a rabbit hole.
On May 19th, okay, so this is 2 days after Rosario has last been heard from at 11:07.
And I don't understand bots either. I wanted to put a chat bot in so that, you know, if someone gave a super chat, it would automatically pick it up and do a response or that type of thing, or a membership, you know, an automatic response to it. But I can't even work that out.
7 a.m., the Kenosha Police Department is at Rosalio's address. And they find through their investigation before too long that the last person in touch with him appears to be a woman whose last name is Macias, who received a text from him at 9:27 p.m. on the 17th, okay? And then she texted him back because she arrived at a building she thought was his. Turns out she was at the wrong building, but she thought she was in his building, and she calls him and texts him multiple times over the next half hour. Where are you? She'd never been here before. Are you coming out? You know, that kind of stuff. And there's never again an answer. So sometime after 9:27 p.m., the state's going to suggest to you all that blood results, and Rosario Gutierrez is no more to those who know him. They go through family and friends, and no one has heard from him since that 9:27 p.m. time on May 17th through any other method of communication. And so law enforcement focuses on Sadie Beecham. Remember, she called 911. She's still at the scene. She is distraught. She's shaking. She's overcome. And she's really focused. Members of the jury, you'll hear the officer testify. She's really focused on getting her kids safe. She's afraid that the defendant has done this and that her kids might not be safe because of what she sees. And so she is allowed to prioritize that. And then this investigation, of course, continues. Rosalio's vehicles are still at the residence. His keys are there. There is a large amount of blood all over his residence in several rooms. The outer hallway, including outer hallway in a way suggests that door opening into the hallway was open at a time when significant bleeding happened, including sprayed blood that looks like impact type of blood. There's blood then right inside the door, as if someone is now in the apartment and they are continuing to have some sort of intervention or attack happen where their blood is spraying. That blood is all over that now closed door on that interior.
They show the crime.
It is all over the rug area there and on the walls and on the tables. It extends to the dining room table. It extends to the chairs on the dining room table. Some of it hits the laptop. Some of it is in the kitchen counter. Some of it is pooled blood throughout that area where you are first in the entrance. There is a small stick of processed wood, like a baseball bat or some other hard object. It's not a log. It's not a piece of cut timber. That piece of wood ends up having blood on it, which is found to be the blood of Rosario Gutierrez, and hair on it as well, which is also found to be Rosario Gutierrez. There is significant blood on the curtains, which are on the entire other end of the apartment from where that entrance to the hallway comes.
Bloody hell.
There is blood on the fan. There's blood on the ceiling in multiple rooms of this apartment. There is pooled and seeped blood into the carpet in the living room on the floor area, and seeped blood, a significant quantity of seeped blood on the couch that is the primary couch.
You never get that stain out.
And in the middle of the area by the couch, there is a missing area where there's blood surrounding it, but then there's a rectangled off area that has no blood whatsoever. It's pristine. Which certainly
have you ever watched those? There is actually a YouTube channel, I think. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. And it's about a company that cleans up crime scenes and stuff after this type of attack, ready for the next tenant to come in. And it's more. And I just can't stop watching it.
Certainly suggest to anybody who looks at it that an area rug, a medium sort of size area rug, was there when significant bleeding happened and is now missing from that apartment. There are little splinters of wood on the couch that are also there, interspersed in the blood and interspersed in hair that is located, strands of hair located on that couch as well. Law enforcement tests several locations at various places. You'll hear where they tested. Each time they tested and they found that it was blood, each of those times the blood came from one individual, and that was Rosario.
Put salt on it?
You will hear that the blood is sprayed, meaning there was impact in multiple locations and multiple different times based on where the blood is located and how the blood presents or looks when law enforcement is present. Remember, present 2 days, about a day and a half after the event. Again, that area rug is completely missing. You'll hear that you might hear some testimony about something called arterial spray, where there's a finer, misty place there too. So some of what you might hear is blunt force trauma, hard objects hitting a bleeding surface. Some areas that you might hear about are more likely, or at least are possible areas where maybe a knife or some sharp object penetrated someone as opposed to blunt force. Rosalio's own phone records say that he dropped his kids off because he had them that weekend. He dropped them off on the 17th, and then he went home, and he was home by 9:08 p.m. So just within an hour of when he's never seen again. Opened a beer, drank a beer. I think maybe opened a second beer. Was expecting this Miss Macias to arrive. His TV was on, and his phone it goes off at 10:30 p.m. around, and that's found several days later, hidden in his freezer. Ooh. His phone and his credit cards are behind all the items in his freezer, hidden there. In the cold, the phone goes off. The last time that phone is on in any way, shape, or form is around 10:30 p.m. on the 17th. Rosalio's keys are there. His wallet has ended up on the couch over some areas that already had blood, so it was placed there after the bleeding occurred. As I said, his credit cards were found in the apartment. There's been no evidence that his credit cards or his bank accounts or any other identifying pieces of that type have been used ever in the 1,018 days since. The home, you'll see the pictures, is filled with pictures of his two children, 11 and 8. He didn't miss gymnastic events. He was an enthusiastic baseball coach for his 11-year-old. You will hear electronic media talk about his excitement and planning for his coaching of his 11-year-old that will be starting literally just days, certainly weeks. Baseball season is right around the corner, And watching his son play baseball was one of the true pleasures of his life. 2 days after he is gone, he has in his date book, his planner, that he is going to be at Camp Timberlea with his children. Some of you may know that local summer camp. That's a 2-day. That's an experience that's supposed to occur on May 19th, just 2 days after this. He never arrives. He never accounts for this with his kids. Obviously, he never coaches baseball. In fact, neither of his kids, who talked to him all the time, who saw him every week, who were in contact with him multiple times a week, you'll hear that his 11-year-old son spoke to him during this time period multiple times per day. And there was never another split second of communication, and has not been for 1,018 days. He has missed their birthdays. He and his mother had a very close relationship, very close. And he has missed all of her important occasions in the last 1,018 days. And the kids he was so devoted for. Never, ever before missed these occasions. Never before, ever out of touch his entire life with the people who cared about him. And not a peep from him since. So I'm back to who the police should go to first. The defendant has actively admitted to Sadie that he is jealous, that he has admitted to Sadie, and then finally to law enforcement, that he took his 11-year-old, as I mentioned, to the mom's home. He has a recording of that incident in his phone, a brief recording of that in his phone. And so law enforcement certainly focuses on the person who has documented motive and jealousy documented. All of this is interesting because it happens while the defendant, according to a woman, his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, is literally living or staying 4 or 5 nights a week at his girlfriend's home. So what I'm describing to you are things he is doing only when he has his kids over, if he is actually traveling around, or he is doing it despite the fact he continues to have this relationship with, when she's interviewed in May of 2020, she says this relationship has been going on about a year, and that he spends 4 to 5 nights a week at her house. But the motive for the defendant is to end this relationship and to do anything he must to stay in control. So the defendant has his kids on this weekend of May 16th and 17th, right? This is the fateful weekend. Sadie picks those kids up in the afternoon. So in the late afternoon, she picks those kids up. And the daughter will tell you, 12 years old, the back of my dad's van, his minivan, which he used to transport us on the afternoon of the 17th, so the same day this happens, was normal. There were no bleach stains and no problems with the carpet in the back of his minivan when she last saw it on the afternoon of the 17th. So now the question is, what is the evidence that the defendant prepared for this attack, this murder? Well, one of the things he did was on May 15th, he took out $50,000 in cash from his account. When law enforcement gets there, he still has more than $46,000 in cash. You're going to see pictures of the bank bag, literally all the money still bound together. So he's got that, and the state will suggest to you that's in case anything goes wrong. He can make that quick run to some location to be out of harm's way or out of apprehension with that much money on hand. You'll hear the daughter indicate that when she left on Sunday afternoon, just hours before Rosario Gutierrez is gone, that she saw rope and duct tape, new rope and new duct tape, down in his basement. It was down on top of essentially a wheelie, a desk chair that's down there. When law enforcement gets to this location on the 19th, there is a wheelie chair down there in the basement. The daughter is completely right about that, but no rope, no new rope, and no new duct tape. So the state would suggest to you that is ideal stuff if you think you need to move a person bleeding, dead. You need to seal up a carpet, try to prevent as much bleeding as you possibly can from the body of the person you're removing from his own apartment. During this period of time, there's an extremely heavy rain going on in Kenosha and in the Milwaukee area. Very heavy rain. And so people are not out and about, obviously, in the same way they normally would be. Another way that the defendant prepares is when we go into his multiple phones, we find that the phone he usually uses to contact people, the phone that he usually uses in situations, is not being answered, though it is just before and just after, but not being answered from 7:30 p.m. to 11:19 p.m. Left behind the phone that had smart capabilities that would be tracked left that behind, and so was not able to answer the calls and the texts that come from multiple people, including his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, who tries to contact him multiple times because she is expecting him in those evening hours to come over. She's talking about what they're going to have for dinner. She's talking about what movie they're going to watch. And finally, she basically, sometime before 11:19 p.m., says, okay, I'm going to bed. She's expected him. And he never shows up at her house and never gives her an explanation until after he would have time to drive from his home in Mequon to Kenosha, commit this crime, and get back to the Mequon area, grab up the phone that he hasn't been answering, and now texts her and says, oh, sorry, fell asleep. Fell asleep during the exact hours that Rosario Gutierrez is never seen again. And then has a very long conversation with her, like a 42-minute conversation with her from midnight to 12:49, maybe trying to get back in her good graces. Because she's back with him the next night. She comes to his house for one of the very first times she's ever come to his house. She comes to his house that night, the next night, and then the night after that, which is the night he's apprehended. So then I want to talk about the cover-up, because a lot of times the way you can tell that somebody's responsible for something is their cover-up, right? That's a common way of determining somebody did something really bad. So officers get to the defendant in the evening hours. And so it's been 2 full days since Rosario Gutierrez is gone to everyone who knows him. And prior to police getting there, a close couple of buddies of Rosario Gutierrez, who have heard Rosario Gutierrez saying, hey, I've got this new woman I'm seeing. Her name is Sadie. She's got a crazy ex-boyfriend, and maybe even that he broke in my truck one time, right? So when Rosario Gutierrez is missing, and the friend group begins to understand this, Michael Campbell is the type of friend who will drive to the person's house where that is suspected in his mind and just go and try to confront the guy. And so he and his buddy go there and they beat the police there because the police are still, doing the police thing. And they bring up, hey, our buddy Rosario is missing. Do you know anything about this? And the defendant claims he's not his brother, claims he's not Zachariah Anderson. He claims he's his brother. He calls the cops. By then, these guys have already left. They're not trying to fight anybody or anything else. They're simply trying to ask a question. This guy's clearly not going to answer their question, and they leave. So he already knows by that moment that Rosario Gutierrez, this person he's focused on, who he's been to his house, he's texted a direct quote of what he said, he's done all sorts of other stuff regarding him, he's certainly communicated to Sadie many times about him. This guy's missing. When they go on the 19th and they look inside that minivan of the defendants, they find that the back is bleached. There's all sorts of bleach stains on the back carpeting. That the seats are out, just the front seats are in, and the back third of the carpeting in that van has literally been cut out. So you're down to where the electronics is exposed. You're down to the plastic flooring under. The carpeting from the minivan is missing, is cut out. Where on the 17th in the afternoon, his daughter said, yeah, it was in there. Nothing was cut out of there. And there was no bleach. Fresh smell of bleach. Carpet cut out in the last 48 hours. You'll hear that in the early morning hours on the 18th, so let's say defendant arrives back in Mequon. By 4:18 a.m., he's searching for area stores by him and when they first open. So he puts in Menards, he puts in Walmart, he's going through all the basic stores. Which of them opens first is essentially his line of inquiry. And he ends up getting a Walmart, opens at 8. The search happened at 4:18 a.m. Okay, this is now about 6 hours after Rosario Gutierrez is last known alive. And you will decide what to make of this. The defendant arrives there just after 8, like 8:15, 8:18.
Yes,
it's pouring rain, still pouring rain, just as it was the day before. Pouring rain parking lot, not many cars. He parks as far as you can humanly park that minivan from the entrance. And he walks that whole distance in, as opposed to parking in any of the probably hundreds of spots that are closer. He parks as far away as possible. Does he have the body still in the back of that car, wrapped in that rug? He buys, with cash, bleach, rubber gloves, garbage bags, shampoo, Q-tips, pays cash, leaves, and heads over to an area where he is doing home demo and rent. He's doing some demo at a lake house in the Belgium, Wisconsin area. A little more isolated locations, not his house, in case law enforcement was already looking for him, in case the body had been discovered. This is on the 18th morning, okay, just hours after Rosario Gutierrez has never been seen. He's at that location, according to his phone, for 3 hours. And then leaves, goes to many other locations, but near that location, so within that immediate area, is a state park, is Lake Michigan, is a number of other remote locations, and hundreds of dumpsters, right? Over the course of any area in Wisconsin, there are hundreds of dumpsters where you might put the remains of Rosario Gutierrez. He's got a burn pit at his house that he has smoldering when the cops get there 2 days later. He's been operating the burn pit in the pouring rain. In it are an underwear band from Fruit of the Loom underwear, jean buttons, steel-toed boot components. Did he burn some clothes that he might have been wearing on that day? Officers eventually get into the defendant's laptop. When they get into it, they find a file that's labeled Rosario Gutierrez Jr. So it's got his name. This is before law enforcement talks to him. I mean, I'm sorry, they don't know this. They haven't been in his computer when they speak to him. But he's typed in the name, Rosario Gutierrez Jr. In that are picture after picture screenshots of Facebook photos of Rosario Gutierrez out socializing, but also a number of pictures of him with his kids.
So this was all found on the defendant's phone.
Think about whether this is obsessive sign of dangerous
Who's watching him?
To have collected these kind of photos in this folder on your laptop. It's got business info, it's got CCAP entries, it's got an electronic map that's pinned to the actual location of Rosalio's home. And then in that same file, under that same label, he's got a picture of one of these trackers. Just a photo with a tracker, like a screenshot, right? Auto tracker, voice activated, that spy equipment he has ordered and paid for just days before.
He had a tracker on the
defendant,
when
law enforcement speaks to him on May 19th, knows Rosario Gutierrez is missing.
Yeah.
Knows they want to talk to him about the possible stalking of Rosario Gutierrez. That's what they tell him they're talking. He knows what he has been doing. He knows the facts that we've described happened. There's no way the defendant does not understand how important a moment this is. Here's his chance. If he's an innocent man, right, to talk about exactly what the
Hello. You are on my to-do list. Where is it? Check up on Bri. I shit you not. I wondered where you were. I hope you are okay. Good morning. Did you have a good Thanksgiving? Oh, you poor bugger. Yeah, it just goes with the territory, though, and it is what it is. Unfortunately, sitting for so long doesn't help. But I'll be all right, I've got my endone. Oh, it's good to see you, sweetheart. Yes, we do love food. I love it too much. Get some rest, darling. Get some rest. And thank you for popping in. And thank you for the super sticker. That is just, you don't have to do that. But you will get to stick on the screen for quite some time. Thank you, Bri. Oh, dear. Have you seen this case, the Zachariah Anderson trial? I've heard about it, but I have not actually watched it. So, and have you kept up to date with Ty Tucker by chance? Have you heard all of the news? Oh, My washing machine's beeping at me. It's off balance. Oh dear. All right. I think so. I think so. Yeah, there you go. Yes. Yep.
Details are that will exonerate him. Let's clear this up.
I just have to go and fix my washing machine.
Here's what the defendant does.
Beeping.
When asked what vehicle he drives, he wants to stick with that he drives the Audi vehicle. In actual fact, Christine Remsburg is driving the defendant's Audi around because her car's on the fritz. So he hasn't driven that car around recently much at all. In the Walmart video, for instance, on the 18th, he's driving the minivan. When he drives the kids back and forth on the 17th, he's driving the minivan. He decides to only share that he's driving the Audi. Why not bring up the minivan? Why not tell him right away, hey, the car I'm using is the minivan. Please go search it. Go do whatever you want. Go take a look at my minivan. Absolutely. Instead, he wants to talk about the Audi. Reluctantly indicates that the minivan is a vehicle. Oh, but anybody could drive it. That's how he decides to behave, knowing how important this moment is. He acts to these officers, tries to give these officers the officers the impression he doesn't even know this Mexican guy's name. I think they call him Junior, something like that, he wants to say. Well, he's written Rosario Gutierrez Jr. in his computer. He's told his daughter the name of Rosario Gutierrez. There's a phone message or a phone recording that he records between him and Sadie where he finally admits, okay, I told her the name. And yet with law enforcement on the 19th, he chooses to act as if this is not even a name he knows. He says Olivia gets that from a grandma, when in fact, he admits to Sadie that's not the case. He denies ever being at Rosalio's home to the officers, where we know based on the electronic evidence, both his text and his own phone, that he's there on May 13th. We know that. But he chooses to deny that he has been there. In fact, says, I don't think I've been to Kenosha. Though his phone is going off a Kenosha tower when he is directly quoting Rosalio. Then he's asked a very simple question. Again, this is the 19th. Where were you in the evening 2 days earlier? Okay? Not where were you 5 Wednesdays ago. Where were you in the evening 2 days ago? He says, yeah, I was with my girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, spent the night over there. That's where I was. Later goes off that. Later changes that up a little bit. But that's what he wants to go with. When Christine Remsburg, who has been with him the last 2 nights after he didn't show up at her house on the date of this homicide, when she's asked that question, also during this exact same time period, where was he? She also chooses to provide false information about his whereabouts. She says, yeah, he was with me, and that's completely false. She eventually is exposed because her sister says, that's not what happened. And when confronted with that, she says, okay, you're right. He wasn't at my house. So the two of them have exactly the same false information about where he was. So you are going to finally hear 2 other important pieces of evidence from the state's perspective. One is when the crime lab examines the van in question. These are people who are the experts in the state at trying to figure out whether there's worthwhile evidence and then trying to do the appropriate testing of evidence having to do with DNA in the state. And so the experts come and the van is eventually brought to them, and they go through that van and they identify a particular location that is near the back. So in that same 1/3 of the minivan where the carpet has now been cut out, but it's about halfway up and it's on the plastic panel and it's just a little speck. And when the 2 DNA and crime scene analysts, when the DNA and crime scene analysts see that, they both say, we think that's blood. But it's so small that they decide that is just going to be our observation. We're not going to use a chemical on it. We're afraid we might not get DNA if we do that. So they observe, they believe it's blood. It is taken to the crime lab. It is tested. And based on the results, again, the analyst, Lisa Treffinger, will tell you she believes it's blood. She believes that based on the process of elimination. It's not semen. It's not skin cells. It's not saliva. It's not a piece of hair. And therefore, based on the content, based on what we can get, on the results, it is blood. I believe it to be blood. She'll offer that opinion to you. She'll also tell you that her test tells her
which one's got more protein.
that blood is the DNA of Rosario Gutierrez. Rosario Gutierrez, there's not going to be any evidence he's ever been in this van, certainly that he's ever bled in this van, that he has anything to do with this van. His blood, his DNA is located on that speck.
Really?
Amidst the area, not in the same area, but in the van filled with bleach and with the cutout carpet. Cutout carpet is never found, by the way. Clothes that the defendant was wearing on the 17th are never found, by the way. Then finally, you're going to hear evidence of an individual, an inmate named Marquand Washington. Marquand Washington has very serious federal charges that are going on right now, and he's being housed in the Kenosha jail on those federal charges. You'll hear him say that several months ago, he came forward to his attorney and told his attorney that I previously roomed with, I shared a cell, I was a bunkmate with the defendant. That when that occurred, that we bonded over some common sort of criminal activity. So, we talked, and I'm not going to talk about the details, but that they bonded over some discussions of their life prior to this date. You'll hear that Marquand Washington was able to tell details about the case, such as when the police raided the defendant's residence, they found a lot of money and a little bit of weed, and that you'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant described the house that was raided as a crappy house, but in a nice area. You'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant told him when talking about murder that murder takes a lot of work, that you have to figure out ways to track people and stalk them, learn their habits, learn what they are up to so that you can find your moment. He suggested trackers from Amazon would be something that would be worthwhile to consider. Marquand Washington says the defendant told him that he wrapped the body up and took it away, that he put the body in trash bags, that he made sure the trash was gone and so it will never be found.
So he told
Marquand
someone.
Washington will say, well, how did you lift that guy? How did you lift him, however you got him out of there? And the defendant told him, I was working out at that point. I was so strong, adrenaline. He said, I was like Superman. The combination of adrenaline and my working out was what allowed him to do it.
So, I suppose.
Marquand Washington tried to get him to tell him, well, why? Why'd you do this? And he said he never really had a real answer, but that one thing that struck him that the defendant told him was, my ex was getting serious with this guy.
Insulin between the toes.
And she was happy. The defendant admitted to Marquand Washington he also had a girlfriend then, though they are no longer together during the period of time that the two of them stayed together, but he provided those details. So you'll hear about the preparation. You'll hear about the act itself. You'll hear from people who love and care about Rosario Gutierrez that he is gone.
How long has he been going for?
You'll hear about the physical evidence, and you'll hear about the confession made. And when you combine all of those pieces of evidence, then from the state's perspective, you will have enough evidence and will hold the defendant responsible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine. Thank you. That's very generous of you.
Take a break.
That's lovely.
I indicated when we broke yesterday, I had some further discussion with the lawyers about some legal issues. And
this guy looks one of those. Looks like one of those dolls, but the mouse.
Doing some more reading last night, and